Tēnā koutou. My name is Loretta Garrett and I'm a soil scientist at Scion. I have been a researcher for 20 years in the area of forest sustainability and carbon. Today, I'll present on contribution of long-term trials to the positive outlook for industrial use of forests. New Zealand planted forests are a significant contributor to New Zealand's economy. They provide timber and fibre for industrial use in New Zealand and overseas. Our forests also support the New Zealand products industry, our sawmills and processing plants. The contribution of our planted forests is even more emphasised when compared to other land uses. For example, far exceeding sheep and beef farming when compared on a per 1,000 hectare basis. At a national scale, our planted forest timber investment is valued at $60 billion. Planted forests also deliver numerous ecosystem services that benefit New Zealanders, for example, carbon capture, erosion control, and regulation of hydrological processes, which further adds to the value of our planted forests. We also have the lowest fertiliser input when compared to other land uses in New Zealand. This puts forestry in a positive position as a low nutrient input land use industry. We do have a number of pressures to plan for. One is the demand of wood and fibre from production forests is increasing as numerous countries seek to transition to circular bioeconomies. This includes the use of harvest residues for bioenergy. To meet this demand, more is being asked of each hectare of planted forest land. There is a drive to push for higher productivity per hectare through improved genetics, higher stocking and shortening forest rotations. Meeting this demand with our current planted forest land area will place greater demands on forest soil resources. We also have uncertainty with our changing climate. Some impacts will be positive, while others are likely to be negative. And there are many uncertainties. For example, the impact of soil nutrient cycling and delivery of nutrients for plant growth. Forest productivity is underpinned by the long-term productive capacity of the soil. Site productivity can be represented by stacking productivity gains, which includes understanding the site and soil. Retaining the productive capacity of the soil is key, as once reduced, it is very difficult to get back. Over 3 decades ago, this issue prompted significant investment in long-term research trial infrastructure to gather evidence for how to manage forest soil nutrients sustainably. We are supporting a $60 billion investment in forestry, so how do long-term trials de-risk our investment? I will now like to step through one example of a positive impact for the industrial use of forests from a long-term trial focusing on nutrient supply. The long-term trial has gathered evidence on impacts of harvest biomass removal from stem-only extraction through to a very extreme experimental treatment which removes the whole tree plus the forest floor. New Zealand has a set of these trials that have reached the end of rotation and which are connected globally to a network of harvest removal trials. We are able to demonstrate with data that all sites are not equal for the total amount of nutrients on site. The soils that support New Zealand's planted forests range from resource poor through to fertile. Where soil nutrients are low, the forest floor and harvest residues are an important store of nutrients on site. For example, at Woodhill, the forest floor made up 21% of the nitrogen on site, whereas at Golden Downs it only made up 2% of the nitrogen on site. We were able to demonstrate with data the percent of nutrient removed from the ecosystem varied by site and by harvest method, and prove that what biomass is removed from what site matters. For example, at sites like Woodhill that have low soil nutrients, a greater percent of the forest floor nutrients are exported with the biomass harvesting when compared to other sites. And higher nutrient sites will be less vulnerable as the soil holds the majority of the nutrients in the forests and is able to buffer the nutrient export with the biomass removal. We were able to demonstrate with data that there were low impacts on site nutrient supply and tree productivity with the removal of biomass, and only at low nutrient sites was the long-term nutrient sustainability of the soil negatively impacted with the removal of the extreme treatment of whole tree plus forest floor. The impact on tree productivity was also limited to low nutrient sites where the forest floor had been removed, and there was no impact on wood quality with the removal of increasing biomass. Therefore, the conclusion was site-specific management matters. The results of the harvest removal trials provide confidence that the productive capacity of most sites won't be impacted on after one rotation. We are able to de-risk our $60 billion forestry investment through including site-specific nutrient management. This confidence extends to regional economic growth and the supply of timber, carbon storage and reporting, nutrient balance model for nutrient tracking, and forest companies developing site-specific nutrient management plans. We need to celebrate these positive impacts and start influencing the public and government with our data-driven good news story. Doing this will deliver the full value of undertaking long-term trials. We have the evidence to demonstrate that the industrial use of forests can be done wisely and responsibly with site-specific management for environmental sustainability. This evidence is important as the environmental, social and ethical criteria will increasingly determine investment and consumer preference, and these long-term trials are supporting us on this journey to meet the required criteria. I would now like to reach out to the wider long-term trial infrastructure and how to get the most out of them. This diagram shows a selection of trials that Scion has on a timeline. The black horizontal line represents this year. Sitting behind these trials are many permanent sample plots that have many uses across a range of projects. What you will notice is that there are a number of trials that have passed the end of their rotation and now gone. The graph at the bottom shows the number of registered trials at Scion. You will see a peak trial installation time was from the 1980 through to 1990. We are now at the end of this rotation for peak trial installation time. We have been very lucky to capture a number of long-term trials at the end of their rotation. The harvest removal trials are one example. We have Puriki Experimental Forest that offers a 50-year legacy. We have trials that were installed under the Growing Confidence in Forestry's Future program that are the start of the next legacy. And we will have new trials going forward to deliver to future research needs. We are installing fewer trials than we have in the past, making what trial infrastructure we have more valuable. There is also a need to move towards experimental forests, moving away from small plots. to allow for forest-level integrated landscape research over multiple rotations. Puraki Experimental Forest is an example of this, with 50 years of research with national impact in water quality, forest productivity through to carbon stock modelling. The trials we have now are capable of high impact. This can be achieved through targeting trials for data collection that will address multiple research areas, from improving uniformity, productivity and stand dynamics, understanding the role of the microbiome in forest resilience, through to improved phenotyping and modelling tools. This will deliver evidence for environmentally sustainable and financially viable forest management. To gain the confidence that our industrial use of forestry can be done wisely and responsibly, we will need to demonstrate to the public and government our continuous improvement in forestry management to gain the full value from these long-term trials. There are some challenges in keeping trials going and getting the basic data out. Some challenges are beyond our control, while others we could look to influence going forward. I would be keen to hear some of your suggestions on this area. If we take the harvest removal trials as an example, we lost one site in Golden Downs to an extreme wind event at mid-rotation. 2/3 of the trial area was flattened. We lost 2 trials to land conversion at mid-rotation. They are now a dairy farm. With 3 decades of time, we have had 3 generations of scientists and the same, if not more, forest managers. During this change, it can be difficult to keep consistency and maintain trial security. We have had an uncertain ride with funding, even to do the basics of measuring a tree, with patches of 3 to 6 year contestable funding projects. With the last contestable funding project coming through the Growing Confidence in Forestry's Future program, coming in just in time to collect the end of rotation data from 3 of the sites. We have seen how long-term trials can create impact for New Zealand forestry. The next generation of trials will continue to refine our knowledge as we move towards an uncertain future. To do this, we need to protect what we have and making the long-term trials work hard by delivering to multiple research areas. And to gain the full value, we will need to engage with the public and government to share and demonstrate that the industrial use of forests can be done wisely and responsibly. This is how you create impact. I would like to acknowledge the funding to capture end of rotation data from the harvest removal trials, which came from the Growing Confidence in Forestry's Future program. Funding to deliver this presentation from the Resilient Forest program, and a very special thanks to the many people over the decades who have contributed towards the harvest removal trials. Ngā mihi. Thank you for listening. I look forward to your questions on the contribution of long-term trials to the positive outlook for the industrial use of forests, and your suggestions around how to address some of the challenges we face with keeping long-term trials secure going forward.